If you're watching this video, you are enrolled in a class called Corporate Strategy. Well, that or you really like watching PowerPoint presentations on YouTube, but I'm going to assume you're enrolled in my Corporate Strategy class. Corporate Strategy has a pretty fancy sounding name, but what is strategy really? In the business world, people use and abuse the term strategy. People call all sorts of things strategies. You may have heard someone say something like, "What's your negotiation strategy? We need a guerrilla marketing strategy. It was a strategic decision to outsource our customer service function." These statements don't necessarily represent strategies in the context of this course. In this class, we will view strategy as the set of actions a firm takes to gain and sustain superior performance relative to competitors. Let's break that down a little bit. First, strategy is all about performance relative to your competitor, not absolute performance. Think about where strategy came from. Before there was corporate strategy, there was military strategy. And there's also sports strategy, which is kind of like the entertaining cousin to military strategy. But in both these contexts, it's not about being the best army out there or being the best sports team out there. It's just about being better than the other guy. You can win the game by just being a little bit better than the other guy. You can win the battle by just being a little bit better than the other guy. Of course, in business, unlike sports, one side doesn't always necessarily lose and the other side doesn't always necessarily win. You can have a win-win situation, and we'll talk a little bit about different ways that you can kind of change the game in order to ensure that everyone wins. But for now, just remember that strategy is about performance relative to your competitor. Keeping with our military theme, strategy also focuses on the long term. This is why we talk about sustaining competitive advantage. So you're looking to win the war, not just the battle. Thirdly, a strategy defines a goal that's related to superior performance. So we can measure all sorts of things relative to our competitors and kind of meet those first criteria. So you can ask who sold the most widgets, whose CEO has the best hair, but these things don't matter unless they contribute to superior performance. You might stop me and say, "Kim, who sold the most widgets if you're a widget manufacturer is probably related to superior performance." But not necessarily. Selling the most stuff doesn't necessarily lead to the best performance. Think about the ride-sharing service Uber. Uber outsells its competitor Lyft nearly 10 to 1. They're a much bigger company and offer a much bigger volume of service. But they're engaged in a price war, so they're actually losing money on most rides. So in that sense, the more rides they offer, the higher volume they achieve, the more money they lose. We'll talk a little bit more about price wars because sometimes it makes sense to engage in one. But for now, just realize that a strategy needs to relate to a goal that drives superior performance. Fourth, a strategy is specific but not too specific. So it tells you the general approach you're going to use to achieve a goal, but it doesn't define the exact tactics that will be used to achieve the goal. Harkening back to sports again, a playbook will tell you where to stand on the court and how to move, but it doesn't tell you how to dribble the ball or how to shoot a free throw. Those are tactics that you need to work on your own. On the flip side, some people make these very grandiose statements and try to pass them off as strategy statements. A strategy also needs to be something that you can implement. So if you were just to tell me that you're going to win the basketball game by just being better than the other guys, that's a grandiose statement, but it doesn't really represent a strategy. Finally, when making a strategy, realize that you can't be all things to all people. So strategic decisions involve the commitment of resources, and they're typically difficult to reverse. So making strategic choices by definition, requires trade offs. Are you going to make the highest quality product or the lowest cost product? So let's pull those all together. Here's an example of a strategy statement. Grandma's sick and needs a caretaker. Little Red Riding Hood aims to be the best caretaker that grandmother has ever had. She promises to arrive more swiftly than any other grandchild. In order to provide uninterrupted grandchild caretaking services, she will adhere to the strict procedures for traveling in the woods set by her grandmother, or by her mother, excuse me. So this is a decent strategy statement because it tells you who Little Red Riding Hood is competing against, the other grandchildren, how she plans on positioning herself relative to those grandchildren to receive a competitive advantage. She's going to arrive more swiftly than them. It defines the problem that she's trying to address. She's trying to care for her sick grandmother. And also explains how she's going to achieve this goal, but doesn't get too tactical. It just says that she's going to adhere to the strict procedures for traveling in the woods set by her mother.